Conquest didn't raise children, but what if Nolan Grayson never made it to Earth, and the Viltrumite Empire sent their oldest, most bloodthirsty executioner instead? What if Conquest raised Invincible? Mark Grayson didn't get a father who patches scraped knees. Mark got a monster who would have called those scraped knees weakness. This isn't a story about a hero struggling with his dark side. This is a boy who never had a light side to begin with. What happens when you take a human child and strip away every ounce of empathy, compassion, and kindness? To understand this timeline, we have to start with one decision. Nolan never made it. His ship was intercepted by a coalition of rebel planets before he reached Earth's solar system. He survived, but he was stranded. The Viltrum Empire doesn't wait for anyone. Thrag sent the one operative he knew wouldn't hesitate, the oldest, most bloodthirsty executioner in the Empire's history. He sent Conquest. Conquest doesn't want the job. He hates stealth missions. He prefers to fly to a planet, smash the cities, and leave. But he can't disobey Thrag, so he travels to Earth. Conquest doesn't adopt a friendly superhero persona. He doesn't wear a white and red cape. He keeps his scars, his missing eye, and his metal arm. He operates under the name Conquest from day one. He kills giant monsters and stops alien invasions, but he causes massive collateral damage. He doesn't care if civilians die in the crossfire. He needs a human mate to test DNA compatibility. He doesn't court Debbie gently. He spots her during a monster attack. He saves her life, but he does it coldly. He uses a statue as a powerful alien to manipulate his way into her life. Debbie is drawn to his power, but she doesn't realize she's walking into a trap. They get married. Mark is born. Conquest doesn't feel love for his new family. He views Debbie as an incubator. He views Mark as a science experiment. But Mark is growing up in a house with one parent who wants to save him, and one who wants to build him into something the universe should be afraid of. Mark's childhood in this timeline is devoid of warmth. Debbie realizes very quickly that she made a mistake. Conquest doesn't smile. He doesn't laugh at jokes. He sits in the living room like a predator waiting for prey. If Debbie asks him about his day, he ignores her. If she argues with him, he doesn't yell. He just stares at her until she backs down. He breaks her spirit through psychological intimidation. Debbie tries to leave him when Mark is 3 years old. She packs a bag while Conquest is out fighting a monster. Conquest returns early. He blocks the front door. He doesn't hit her. He just crushes the doorknob into metal powder with his bare hands. He tells her that she belongs to him, and Mark belongs to the Empire. He tells her that if she ever tries to run away again, he will kill everyone she speaks to for the rest of her life. Debbie stays. She becomes a prisoner in her own home. She tries to show Mark love, but Conquest actively separates them. Conquest takes over Mark's upbringing entirely. He doesn't let Mark play with toys. He doesn't let Mark watch cartoons. Conquest teaches Mark that human emotions are chemical defects. He teaches Mark that humans are animals and Viltrumites are gods. Then comes the moment that defines everything. Mark is 5 years old. He falls on the concrete path outside the house and scrapes his knee wide open. It's a small wound, a nothing wound. He sits on the pavement and starts to cry, the way every 5-year-old cries, without thinking, without choosing to, because it hurts, and he's small and he wants someone to come. Debbie is through the front door before Conquest can move. She's running. She's halfway down the path, crouching down. Her arm's already reaching for him. Mark looks up and sees her coming. For one full second, he watches her hand reaching towards him and something in his face opens. He wants her to reach him. He needs her to reach him. Conquest steps between them. He doesn't touch Debbie. He doesn't have to. He just fills the space in front of her and stops her cold. He looks down at Mark on the pavement. His expression doesn't change. He tells Mark that crying is a weakness. He tells Mark that pain isn't real. He tells Mark to stand up and walk on the bleeding leg without making a sound. Mark looks past his father's legs at his mother. Debbie's hands are still outstretched. She's mouthing his name. She can't get past. She can't reach him. Mark stands up. He doesn't make a sound. He walks past Conquest and into his house. Debbie watches him go. She sits down on the path alone. She puts her face in her hands. That is the last time that Mark ever cries. He learns very quickly that the only way to earn his father's approval is to shut off his emotions. He learns to be cold and quiet. Cecil Stedman has been watching this house for 3 years, and he's starting to realize that what grows up inside it may be the worst problem he's ever had. Cecil Stedman runs the GDA. His job is to protect the planet at all costs. In the normal timeline, Cecil trusts Omni-Man. Nolan plays the part of a hero perfectly, but in this timeline, Cecil is terrified of Conquest from day one. Conquest doesn't play by Cecil's rules. If a supervillain robs a bank, Conquest doesn't arrest them. Conquest punches a hole straight through the villain's chest in front of the cameras. He leaves bloody corpses in the street. Cecil invites Conquest to GDA headquarters. He sits him down. He tells Conquest that he can't execute people without a trial. Conquest laughs. He steps close to Cecil. He tells Cecil that human laws don't apply to a Viltrumite. He points his metal arm at the GDA soldiers in the room and tells Cecil that he can kill every single person in the building in less than 3 seconds. He makes it clear he isn't Earth's protector. He's Earth's owner. Cecil realizes he has a massive problem. He can't fight Conquest. He doesn't have anything that can hurt him. So he orders his scientists to start building something that can. He orders Donald to track Conquest's every move. He dedicates an entire black budget division to the question of how you kill a Viltrumite. What Cecil doesn't know yet is that the answer to that question is already growing up in Conquest's house. But Cecil is completely wrong about which side it'll land on. Mark attends a normal public high school. He doesn't act like a normal teenager. He doesn't slouch. He doesn't stutter. He walks down the hallway with perfect posture. He looks at the other students with absolute disgust. Conquest trained him to view humans as insects, and Mark believes that. The same week Mark scores a perfect 100 on his anatomy exam, his teacher calls Conquest in for a parent-teacher conference. She tells Conquest that Mark is exceptional. She says that she's never seen a student grasp the mechanics of the human body so quickly. She asks if Mark is considered medicine. Conquest says nothing. He looks at the teacher for a long moment. He stands up and leaves. Mark never takes another science class again. William Clockwell tries to be Mark's friend. In the normal timeline, William is Mark's anchor to humanity. In this timeline, William approaches Mark in the cafeteria and makes a joke. Mark doesn't laugh. Mark looks at William's neck. He knows exactly from the anatomy exam, from Conquest's training, how much pressure it would take to snap William's spine. He tells William to walk away and never speak to him again. William feels the pure malice in Mark's voice. William walks away, terrified. Adam Eve notices Mark. She senses he's hiding something and tries to connect during a science class. She asks him about his home life. Mark shuts her down immediately. He views her as a potential threat. He doesn't see a romantic interest. He sees a human who asks too many questions. Mark spends his high school years isolated by choice. He doesn't care about the people around him. He only cares about getting stronger. He works out constantly. He pushes his human body to the absolute limit, waiting for his Viltrumite powers to activate. He won't have to wait much longer, and the way they activate will tell you everything about who he already is. Mark's powers don't activate while taking out the trash like in the normal timeline. They activate during an act of violence. Mark is 16. A group of older bullies target him behind the school. They don't know who his father is. They push Mark against a brick wall, and the leader punches him hard in the stomach. The physical stress triggers his Viltrumite genetics. The human DNA suppresses. The alien DNA takes over. Mark doesn't feel a punch. His muscles harden instantly. He looks at the bully. In a normal story, the hero discovers his powers and runs away. Mark doesn't run. Conquest trained him to crush his enemies. Mark grabs the bully by the throat. He doesn't realize his own strength. He squeezes. He crushes the boy's windpipe instantly. The boy drops to the ground, suffocating to death in seconds. The other bullies run away screaming. Mark looks at his hands. He doesn't feel guilt. He doesn't feel fear. He feels absolute power and a surge of adrenaline. Conquest arrives at the school a minute later. The GDA flag the incident. Conquest lands in the alley. He looks at the dead human on the ground. He looks back at Mark. He doesn't scold him. Conquest smiles. It's the first time Mark has ever seen his father smile. He puts a hand on Mark's shoulder. He tells Mark that he's finally awake. He tells Mark that the training is over and the real work begins. Mark embraces his Viltrumite heritage. He doesn't design a colorful superhero suit. Conquest brings him a traditional Viltrumite uniform. The real education starts now. Conquest doesn't let Mark fight weak human criminals. He wants Mark to understand true combat. Conquest takes Mark to a GDA black site. The facility is holding a group of giant bioengineered monsters. Conquest rips the roof off the building and throws Mark inside. He tells Mark to kill all of them, or he won't let him out. Mark fights for his life. He takes heavy damage. He gets thrown into concrete walls. His arms get broken. His face gets slashed. But his Viltrumite healing factor kicks in. He learns to fight through the pain. He doesn't use martial arts. He fights like an animal. He uses his strength to rip the monsters apart, crushing their skulls and tearing their limbs off. Mark kills every single monster in the facility. He stands in a pool of blood, breathing heavily, almost resembling the original timeline where Nolan killed the Guardians of the Globe. Conquest floats down. He looks at the carnage. He nods. He tells Mark that humans will try to tame him. The GDA will offer him money and fame. Conquest teaches Mark that money and fame are tools to control the weak. True power is taking whatever you want, whenever you want it. Mark absorbs the lesson. He realizes he doesn't have to obey the speed limit. He doesn't have to wait in line. He especially doesn't have to listen to anyone. Conquest has one more lesson to teach, and this one requires an audience. Conquest receives a message from the Viltrumite Empire. The DNA test is a success. Mark is strong enough to join their ranks. Drag orders Conquest to prepare the planet for immediate occupation. Conquest reads the message twice. Then he looks at Mark. He tells Mark that they're going to remove Earth's defenders. He says it the way a boxing coach says it's time for a real fight. He says this is Mark's final test. Then he adds something else. He tells Mark that Thrag will want to evaluate him personally once this is done. He says it slowly, letting the weight of it land. He tells Mark that a personal evaluation from Thrag is not something you want to fail. He doesn't explain further. He doesn't need to. Conquest calls the Guardians to their underground headquarters. The Immortal, Darkwing, War Woman, Red Rush, Martian Man, Aquarius, and Green Ghost arrive. They expect a briefing on a global threat. Conquest and Mark arrive together wearing their Viltrumite uniforms. The Immortal recognizes the threat instantly. He yells for the team to attack. The fight is short, brutal, and one-sided. Conquest is significantly older and stronger than Nolan ever was. He doesn't hold back. Conquest intercepts Red Rush. He doesn't just crush his head. He rips Red Rush in half before the speedster can throw a punch. Mark targets Darkwing. Darkwing throws explosive batarangs. Mark doesn't even bother to dodge. The explosions burn his suit, but his skin is fine. Mark flies forward, grabs Darkwing by the cape, and slams him into the floor so hard that the concrete shatters. Darkwing dies instantly. War Woman hits Conquest with her mace. Conquest catches it with his metal arm. He smiles. He punches War Woman in the chest. His fist goes straight through her armor and pierces her heart. She drops dead. Mark fights Martian Man. The Martian wraps around Mark, trying to suffocate him. Mark remembers the training. He flies straight up, smashing his back against the low ceiling. The impact crushes Martian Man against the steel beams. Mark rips the alien off his back and snaps his neck. The Immortal charges Conquest with pure rage. He lands 3 heavy punches on Conquest's face. Conquest spits out a tooth and laughs. He grabs the Immortal by the throat. He doesn't kill him fast. He crushes his throat out slowly, forcing him to watch Mark execute Aquarius and Green Ghost without a shred of hesitation. The entire Guardians roster is dead in under 2 minutes. Conquest and Mark stand in the ruined headquarters covered in blood. They don't fall into comas. They aren't heavily injured. They look at each other. Mark feels a dark, twisted sense of pride. He's proved he's a true Viltrumite. Earth has no more heroes. And somewhere in a small house on the outskirts of the city, a woman named Debbie Grayson is watching the news broadcast and recognizing her son in the footage. She watches him standing over the bodies. She watches him look directly into one of the security cameras. He doesn't look like her son anymore. At the exact moment Cecil Stedman is watching the same footage, a new ship enters Earth's atmosphere. Nolan Grayson finally arrives. Nolan has spent 16 years fixing his crashed ship on a dead planet. He expects to find Earth ripe for the taking. He lands in a deserted field and flies towards the nearest city to assess the population. He finds a war zone. Conquest and Mark didn't hide after killing the Guardians. They broadcasted a message to the entire planet. They announced that Earth belongs to the Viltrum Empire. They demanded absolute surrender. They destroyed military bases to prove their point. Nolan crashes through the roof of Cecil's war room in the Pentagon. The soldiers point their guns at him. Nolan demands to know what is happening. Cecil shows him the footage. Cecil explains that Conquest has ruled the planet through fear for almost 20 years. Nolan watches the footage of Mark. He sees the brutal efficiency. He sees the dead look in Mark's eyes. Nolan feels bittersweet. He realizes what happened. Bragg replaced him, and Conquest has taken over Earth. Nolan tracks Conquest and Mark to a ruined military base in the desert. He lands on the tarmac. Conquest and Mark stand amongst burning tanks and dead soldiers. Conquest recognizes Nolan immediately. He laughs loudly. "Took you long enough." Nolan ignores the joke. His eyes move across the battlefield. Destroyed tanks, dead soldiers. The smell of smoke hangs in the air. Then he looks at the young Viltrumite standing beside Conquest. "So the reports were true," Nolan says. Conquest places a hand on Mark's shoulder. "My son." Nolan studies him carefully. The hybrid is younger than he expected, but the discipline is obvious. The posture, the confidence, the complete absence of hesitation. "You trained him well," Nolan admits. Conquest grins. "I removed every human weakness before it had a chance to grow." Nolan's gaze shifts to the bodies scattered across the base. "You've secured the planet." "I've secured more than that," Conquest replies. "Earth is already broken. Bragg will have his new breeding world ahead of schedule." Nolan nods once. It isn't approval. It's an acknowledgement that the mission has succeeded. His attention turns to Mark. Omni-Man is a Viltrumite in and out. He naturally wants to see a test of strength. "Show me." Mark doesn't ask what he means. He launches forward without warning. The fight between Nolan and Mark is brutal and bloody. Nolan doesn't underestimate Mark. He fights carefully at first, trying to understand what Conquest has created. He tries to predict Mark's movements and see how much of Conquest's training has shaped him. Mark fights with lethal intent. He punches Nolan in the ribs. He uses his speed to outmaneuver the older Viltrumite. Mark fights exactly like Conquest taught him. No wasted movements. Aim for vital organs. Never stop hitting. Nolan realizes he has to fight seriously or he will die. He punches Mark in the jaw, and the hit sends Mark crashing through a concrete bunker. Nolan tells Mark to stop. He tells him that Conquest turned him into something the Empire itself should fear. Conquest watches from the sky, smiling. Mark flies out of the bunker. He tackles Nolan in the air. They break the sound barrier. They trade blows high above the clouds. Nolan is stronger, but Mark is unhinged. Mark doesn't care if his own bones break as long as he inflicts damage. Nolan tries to get him to stop, saying that he's proven his point, but Mark doesn't listen. All he's seeing is red. Mark gouges his thumbs into Nolan's eyes. Nolan screams and drops his guard. Mark capitalizes instantly. He delivers a devastating headbutt to Nolan's face, fracturing his skull. Nolan plummets. He crashes into the desert floor, creating a massive crater. He struggles to stand. He's badly injured. Mark lands in the crater and walks towards him slowly. Nolan looks at Mark. He sees no hesitation. He sees no conflict. He sees a perfect cold-blooded killer. Conquest did exactly what he intended, Nolan whispers. He created a weapon. Mark doesn't respond. He grabs Nolan by the head. He twists violently. The sound of Nolan's neck snapping echoes across the desert. Dies in the dirt. Conquest lands next to Mark. He pats him on the back. He tells Mark that he passed the ultimate test. He killed one of the Empire's greatest warriors. Cecil Stedman watched the whole thing via satellite. He's watching the smoke clear above the crater. He lights a cigarette with shaking hands. He still has one card left to play, so he decides to play it. Cecil initiates the final defense protocols. He deploys the Reaniman. He targets Conquest and Mark with the orbital laser. The multi-billion-dollar GDA weapon his scientists spent 3 years building specifically for this problem. The beam fires from space. A column of concentrated energy hits the desert with the force of a small nuclear device. The sand turns to glass. Cecil watches the smoke on the monitor. He waits. The smoke clears. Conquest is standing in the center of the glass crater. His clothes are gone. His skin is scorched. Mark is on one knee. His uniform is completely burned off. His back is raw. The flesh split open in a half a dozen places. He's breathing hard. He looks at his hands. The damage is real. The burns are closing, but it's taking him a while to heal. For 3 full seconds, Mark Grayson is actually hurt. He looks up at the sky. He looks at the source of the beam. His expression isn't anger, it's interest. Mark launches himself into orbit. He flies straight through the center of the satellite, ripping its core out. The multi-billion-dollar weapon explodes into space junk. Mark returns to Earth. He targets the GDA headquarters. Cecil deploys a teen team. Robot, Rexplode, Adam Eve, and Monster Girl stand outside the Pentagon. They know they can't win, but they're there anyway. Mark lands in front of them. Conquest floating above, watching. Robot tries logic. Mark fly straight through the drone chassis, shattering it into pieces. Rexplode throws a dozen charged explosives directly at Mark's chest. The blasts hit. They don't disintegrate on contact this time. The force rocks Mark backward half a step. The burns open up again. The same burns from the orbital laser, tearing back open before the healing factor can fully close them. Mark looks down at his chest. He looks at Rex. His face is completely calm. He walks through the smoke. He grabs Rex by the arm and rips it off. Rex screams. Mark crushes his skull with a casual stomp. Monster Girl transforms into her massive troll form. She charges Mark with a heavy punch. Mark catches her fist with one hand. He stops her momentum completely. He punches her in the stomach. The force ruptures her internal organs. She transforms back into a girl, coughing up blood, and dies on the pavement. Adam Eve is the only one left. She constructs massive pink energy shields. She fires blasts of concentrated subatomic energy at Mark. Mark walks through her blasts. The energy burns his skin. The healing factor closes it. He walks up to her shields. In the normal timeline, Mark loves Eve. He would do anything to protect her. In this timeline, Mark doesn't feel a single thing for her. He views her shields as a mild annoyance. He punches the shields. The pink energy shatters like glass. Eve looks at him. She begs him to stop. Mark doesn't hesitate. He drives his fist straight through her chest. She falls to the ground, dead. At least for now. Earth's resistance is completely broken. The only thing left between Mark and the end of this is one man with a cigarette and no exit. Mark rips the roof off the Pentagon. He drops into Cecil's war room. The GDA soldiers open fire. The bullets bounce off his skin. He walks through the gunfire, killing soldiers with backhands. He reaches Cecil. Cecil doesn't back away. He lights a cigarette. "You're a monster," Cecil says. "I'm efficient," Mark replies. Mark grabs Cecil by the throat. He holds him up. "You thought human DNA would make me weak," Mark says. "You thought I'd be a hero. You were wrong. Humanity is a disease. Viltrum is a cure." Mark crushes Cecil's throat. He drops his body on the floor. The GDA is officially destroyed. The entire planet is defenseless. Conquest lands in the ruined war room. He surveys the carnage. He nods. He contacts the Viltrumite Empire and tells them that Earth is secure and ready for occupation. He looks at Mark standing in the wreckage. For Conquest, this is the end of a mission. For Mark, it's the beginning of something else. He's starting to do the math. A few weeks later, a massive Viltrumite warship enters Earth's orbit. Grand Regent Thrag arrives personally. He wants to see the half-breed that secured a planet so quickly. He lands in Washington, D.C., accompanied by an elite guard including Anissa, Lucan, and Craig. Conquest and Mark kneel before Thrag. Thrag looks at Mark. He's impressed. He didn't expect human DNA to yield something this brutal and efficient. He tells Conquest that he did a good job. He tells Conquest that he'll be rewarded with a seat on the High Council. Then he looks at Mark and tells him that he will serve as a foot soldier in the vanguard. But Mark doesn't respond well to this. Conquest trained him to believe that the strong take what they want. Conquest trained him to never submit to anyone weaker than him. Mark looks at Thrag. Then he looks at Conquest. Then he stands up. Thrag narrows his eyes. He demands to know what Mark is doing. Mark is doing the math he's been doing for years. He secured the planet. He killed the Guardians. He killed Nolan. He broke the GDA. Conquest watched. Conquest is old. Conquest runs on reputation now, not current strength. Mark doesn't want to be a foot soldier. He wants to rule, and he knows exactly where to start. Mark turns to Conquest. He doesn't challenge Thrag first. He has to eliminate his commander. "You taught me that power belongs to those who take it," Mark says. Conquest laughs. He thinks Mark is making a joke. He tells him to kneel back down. Mark doesn't kneel. He flies forward at maximum speed. He punches Conquest directly in the scarred eye. The hit lands with the force of a nuclear bomb. Conquest's head snaps back. He stumbles. He's genuinely shocked. He didn't build a weapon expecting to be pointed at himself. Conquest recovers fast. He roars and charges, but Conquest fights with centuries of experience. He hits Mark with devastating blows. He breaks Mark's ribs. He shatters Mark's nose. But Mark has youth and stamina, and a complete absence of self-preservation. He doesn't care if he dies. He only cares about winning. Mark fights like a feral animal. He bites Conquest's ear off. He gouges his fingers into Conquest's remaining eye. Conquest swings his metal arm and smashes Mark into the ground. Mark grabs the metal arm, braces his feet against Conquest's chest, and pulls with everything he has. The sound of tearing flesh and snapping bones fill the air. Mark rips Conquest's metal arm out of its socket. Conquest screams. Blood sprays everywhere. Mark doesn't give him a chance to recover. He tackles Conquest to the ground. He mounts him. He raises his fist and begins to punch. He punches Conquest in the face. Again and again and again. He doesn't stop. He punches until his own knuckles break. He punches until Conquest's skull caves in completely. Conquest stops moving. The oldest, most brutal executioner in the Viltrumite Empire is dead, beaten to death by his own son. And there's an irony in Conquest raising Mark, because Conquest is probably the only person that can make Mark so corrupt that he would kill his own father. Mark stands up. He's covered in blood. His breathing is ragged. His uniform is torn to shreds. He turns to look at Thrag and the elite guard. The guard steps forward, ready to execute Mark for treason. Thrag raises a hand. He looks at the dead body of Conquest. He looks at Mark. Thrag operates on pure logic. He values strength above everything else. He just watched a half-breed teenager beat one of the Empire's strongest warriors to death with with his bare hands. Thrag doesn't see a traitor, he sees the future. He walks up to Mark. He offers him a place at his side. He tells him that together, they will conquer the universe. Mark looks at Thrag. He runs the calculation. He can't beat Thrag today. He needs time to heal. He needs time to grow. He nods. He accepts the offer. He knows that it's a temporary alliance. He's known for years how to wait. The aftermath of Mark's ascension is dark and absolute. Earth is transformed into a massive Viltrumite breeding camp. The human population is enslaved. Cities are leveled to build training facilities for the next generation of hybrids. Debbie Grayson spends the rest of her life in a small cell. Bare walls, one window, a cot. She's kept alive because Mark ordered it explicitly. Not out of mercy, not out of sentiment, but because she's the one person left in the universe who watched him become this. Once a year, Mark lands outside her cell window in his Viltrumite commander uniform. He doesn't come in. He just hovers there for a minute, looking at her through the glass. He doesn't say anything. Then he just leaves. He doesn't know why he does it. He'd tell you it means nothing. He'd tell you she's a trophy, a pet, proof that his human origin didn't beat him. But he keeps coming back. Eventually, Mark Grayson becomes the supreme commander of the Viltrumite Vanguard. He leads the invasion of countless planets. In the normal timeline, Invincible brings peace to the galaxy. He unites the coalition of planets. He hates everything that Thrag stands for. In this timeline, Invincible becomes the boogeyman of the universe. He destroys the coalition. He personally executes Alan the alien. He burns entire star systems to the ground just to prove a point. He becomes far more cruel and efficient than Conquest ever was. The story ends centuries later. Thrag is dead, killed in his sleep by Mark Grayson. Mark sits on the throne of the Viltrum Empire. He rules the entire galaxy with an iron fist. There's no rebellions. There's no heroes left to fight him. He exterminated all of them. He sits in the dark, surrounded by absolute power. He has everything Conquest promised him. He has no friends, no family, no love. But he is exactly who he was trained to be.